So, how much money do you actually need to be rich in today's world? Well, we have this really messed up definition of what it means to be rich right now. We look at the flashiness, we look at the lifestyle, we look at the stuff, but here's the thing nobody on social media tells you. Most of these people, they aren't rich. They are just loud. If you actually look at the data, like the real numbers from the Federal Reserve and the Census Bureau, being rich in America looks totally different than what you see on Instagram. And here's the good news, or maybe the bad news, depending on how you look at it. To be in the top 10% of wealthy people in the US, you don't need the yacht. You don't need the Ferrari. You might be actually closer to it than you think. Or you might be making a ton of money, but your financial habits are not just in order. So we need to talk about the difference between looking rich and being wealthy, because there is a number that separates the two, and it's not the one on your paycheck. So let's talk about something that is quietly messing with everyone's money, the illusion of wealth. Okay, so let's start with a little mental exercise. Picture two people. Person A is driving a brand new luxury SUV. They have the newest iPhone. They go to the fancy gym with the eucalyptus towels, and they post pictures of their $20 cocktails every weekend. They look like they have made it. Now, person B drives a Honda that is maybe 6 or 7 years old. They wear jeans and a t-shirt. They cook at home mostly, and they look like, well, they might look like your normal neighbor. Our brains are wired to think person A is the rich one. But if we opened their bank accounts, we might see a totally different story. Person A might be making $200,000 a year, but they are spending $205,000 a year. They have a massive car payment, credit card debt, and if they lost their job tomorrow, they would be panic selling that SUV within a week. Person B might make $80,000 per year, but they have zero debt, they have investments, they have emergency savings, and if they lost their job and can't find another one for, let's say, a year, they would still be fine. This is the trap. We confuse income with wealth. Income is how much money flows into your life. It's the water coming out of the faucet. Wealth or net worth is how much water stays in the bucket. You can have a firehouse of income, but if your bucket has a massive hole in the bottom called lifestyle inflation, you will never actually be wealthy. You will just be a high-paid poor person. And today, with inflation being what it is, that hole in the bucket is getting bigger for everyone. So let's look at the income ladder first. Let's see where you actually stack up against your neighbors and why a high salary might not feel as high as it used to. Now, I want to throw some numbers at you, but I don't want to just bore you with a spreadsheet. I want to talk about what these numbers actually feel like to live on. Let's start in the middle. The median household income in the US right now is around $84,000 based on the data we have from 2024. That puts you smack in the middle, top 50%. Now, about $83,000 sounds like a decent chunk of change, right? But if you are raising a family on that today, it's tight. You're not gonna be starving, but you're not buying a vacation home. You're paying the bills, maybe saving a little bit, but one bad car repair or one surprise medical bill is going to hurt. That's the reality of half the country. You are surviving, but you aren't exactly thriving. Now, let's climb up a little bit. To be in the top 20%, your household needs to bring in about $150,000. This is where things start to shift. This is the breathing room zone. At $150,000, you're not stressing about the price of the eggs. You can go out to dinner without checking your bank app first. You can start maxing out your retirement accounts, maybe. But here's the funny thing. People at this level usually don't feel rich. They just feel okay. Because usually when you hit this income, you move to a nicer neighborhood, you get a nicer car, and suddenly that extra money disappears. Let's go higher.
Higher. Jesus, how many more Galileos do you want?
The top 10%. To be in the top 10% of earners, you need to make $251,360, $250,000 per year. This is where lifestyle really changes. You are taking nice vacation, international vacations maybe, not just driving to the coast. You might have a housekeeper. You are sending kids to the private schools. But again, I know people making $250,000 who live paycheck to paycheck. It sounds crazy, but if you buy a $1 million house and 2 Teslas, that $250,000 vanishes fast. Then there is top 5%. That's $335,575. And finally, the top 1%. To be in 1%er in income, your household needs to bring in $659,000. And if you're single, you need to make about $450,000. At this level, income stops mattering as much. You aren't working to pay the light bills, you are working to keep score. But here's the kicker, and this is the part that hurts. You can make $659,000 per year and still have a net worth of zero. Yes, if you make $600,000 and spend all of it on luxury trips, gambling, and depreciating assets, you are financially indistinguishable from a college student with $0. Actually, you're worse off because the college student doesn't have tax bill like yours. Income is vanity. It's like what you brag about at parties. Net worth is sanity. It's what lets you sleep at night. And the net worth numbers, those tell a much scarier story about the economy. And by now, if you have finally realized that yes, maybe your salary is not the only thing that matters, do me a favor and please hit the like button. It helps the channel, obviously, but it also tells YouTube that people actually care about financial reality, not just hype. And if you want to fix that hole in the bucket we talked about earlier, please make sure you subscribe because I talk about this stuff every week. Okay, let's get into the scary numbers now. The real scoreboard. So, net worth. Simple math. Everything you own, like cash, house, investments, minus everything you owe, like mortgage, student loans, credit cards. This is the number that actually determines if you are rich. The median net worth for an American household is roughly $193,000. Now, before you panic or celebrate, remember that for most people, the vast majority of that $193,000 is tied up in their house. You can't eat your house, you can't pay for your groceries with your front door. So while it looks good on paper, it doesn't always mean you have cash. But here's where the generational divide gets brutal. If you are under the age of 35, the median net worth is only about $39,000. $39,000. That is, well, the price of a decent Toyota Camry. That is an entire generation's financial stability, the cost of one mid-range sedan. This is why young people feel like the system is rigged, because to buy a house, you need a down payment that is basically your entire net worth. If you're under 35 and you have more than $39,000 to your name, congratulations, you are ahead of the curve. But let's look at what it takes to be rich by net worth. To be in the top 25%, you need a net worth of $659,000. At this level, you probably own your home, you have a solid retirement account growing, and you have real financial security. You aren't worried about losing your job next week. To crack the top 10%, you need $1.9 million. This is the gateway to being wealthy, almost $2 million. At this level, your money is starting to make money. You aren't just working for a paycheck. Your investments are generating returns that might be equal to a normal person's salary. And the top 1%? Well, to be in the top 1% of wealth in America, you need between $11.6 million and $13.6 million. That is a massive jump. The gap between top 10%, which is almost $2 million, and the top 1%, which is almost $11 million, is insane. It's non-linear. It shows that once you have money, it becomes much easier to make more money. The first million is the hardest, but the 10th million just kind of shows up while you're sleeping. But here's the uncomfortable truth about these numbers. The gap between the haves and have-nots isn't just about hard work anymore. It's about asset ownership. If you own things like stocks, real estates, businesses, inflation makes you richer. The price of your house goes up, the stock market goes up. But if you don't own things, if you just work for a wage and rent your apartment, inflation makes you poorer. Your rent goes up, your groceries go up, which means your spending goes up, but your asset column stays at zero. This is why the middle class feels like it's disappearing, because you either own assets and move up to the top 25%, or you don't, and you slide down to the bottom 50%. Now moving on to the lifestyle and mindset. So what does life actually look like at these different levels? Most of us have a stereotypical image of a billionaire wearing a tuxedo and expensive jewelry. But in 2026, wealth looks very boring. If you are in the bottom 50% of net worth, life is reactive. You are constantly reacting to the problems. The car breaks down, crisis. The rent goes up, crisis. You are living paycheck to paycheck, and your mental energy is 100% focused on survival. It's exhausting. It's expensive to be poor because you can't buy in bulk. You can't pay for preventive maintenance. So Things break more often. Jump to the top 50%, you probably have an emergency fund. You probably sleep better. A flat tire is annoying, but not a disaster. But you're still dependent on your job. If you stop working, the lifestyle stops. Now look at the top 10%, the 1.9 million club. This is where the mindset shifts. You stop thinking about how do I survive the month and start thinking about how do I minimize taxes. People at this level usually have multiple streams of income. Maybe they have a rental property, maybe they have a massive dividend portfolio. They focus on optimizing. But the biggest difference, it's not the car they drive. In fact, if you go to a nice neighborhood, the guy in the top 10% is probably driving the Ford Escape or the Volvo. The guy in the top 50% who is trying to look rich is the one leasing the Mustang. And at the top 1% level, the $11 million plus crowd, money becomes abstract. They don't worry about retirement. They worry about legacy. They worry about how do I make sure my grandkids don't turn into spoiled brats who ruin the family fortune. Their relationship with money is about power and influence, not consumption. They aren't buying things to impress people. They're buying businesses to control the market. And this brings us to the biggest trap that stops normal people from moving up these levels: the golden handcuffs. Let's go back to that guy making $250,000 per year. Why isn't he in the top 10% of net worth yet? It's something called lifestyle creep. Human beings are really bad at being satisfied. When we get a raise, we don't just say, great, I'll just save the difference. We say, great, I can finally afford that better apartment. We upgrade our life to match our income. And this is dangerous because once you upgrade, it's psychologically painful to downgrade. If you're used to flying first class, going back to economy feels like torture. If you're used to ordering food, using Uber Eats every night, cooking feels like a chore. So you get trapped. You have to keep that high stress job to pay for the lifestyle you have built. You have golden handcuffs. You look rich, but you're also a slave to your own expenses. Compare that to someone who makes $80,000 but lives like they make $50,000. They invest the difference. They let compound interest do its thing. Over 20 years, the person earning 80K might actually end up with higher net worth than the person earning 200K who spends it all. The 200K earner has a high burning rate. The 80K earner has a high saving rate. And in the game of the wealth, your saving rate is the only lever you can actually control. You can't always control your income. You can't control the stock market, but you can control how much stupid stuff you can buy. But this is hard. It requires you to be the weird one. It requires you to drive the old car when your friends are upgrading. It requires you to say no to the expensive trip. It requires you to value freedom over status. And in social media world, status is a hell of a drug. This brings up a question I really wanted to ask you guys. Is it better to make 200K per year and have to work 60 hours a week to maintain a fancy lifestyle? Or is it better to make $100,000 per year, live simply, but have zero debt and total control over your time? Some people may say that 100K life is settling. Some people may say that 200K life is slavery. I want to know what you think. Please let me know in the comments. And moving on to the strategies and the harsh reality. All right, let's get real for a second. I can sit here and tell you that just save money and you'll be rich, but that's not entirely true. The strategies that work for the bottom 50% do not work for the top 10%. If you're in the bottom 50%, your strategy is defense. You need to kill high interest debt. You need an emergency fund. You cannot invest your way out of credit card debt. The math doesn't work. If you try to act like a millionaire and invest in startups, when you have 20% interest on a Visa card, you are going to get crushed. But once you cross into that top 25%, once you have that breathing room, the strategy has to change to offense. You have to stop just saving and start investing. You can't save your way to the top 10%. You can't stuff enough cash under the mattress to reach $1.9 million because inflation will eat it alive. You have to buy assets, real estate, index funds, businesses, and this is where the top 5% and 1% operate differently. They use leverage. They use debt, good debt, to buy more assets. They use tax codes that most people don't even know exist. Trying to use top 1% strategies when you're just starting out is like trying to climb Mount Everest in flip-flops. But staying stuck in saver mode when you have the capital to invest is like owning a Ferrari and never driving it out of the driveway. The harsh reality is this: most people will never reach the top 10% of net worth. And it's not always because they didn't make enough money. It's because nobody taught them the rules of the game at each level. We teach people how to get a job, but we never teach them how to build a portfolio. We have engineers and doctors who are brilliant at their jobs but financially illiterate. And we have janitors who retire as millionaires because they understood one simple concept: spend less than you earn and invest the difference for the long term. It's not magic, it's math. But it's the math that requires patience, discipline, and willingness to look poor for a while so you can be rich forever. Look, the definition of rich is personal. For some of you, it might be that $11 million number. You want the private jet, and that's fine if you are willing to pay the price to get there. For others, rich just means waking up in the morning and not having a pit in your stomach when you think about your bills. It means being able to quit a toxic job because you have forget you money in the bank. That freedom, that is the real wealth. The cars, the clothes, the watches, that stuff is just packaging. Don't trade your actual freedom for packaging. Figure out your number, figure out your net worth, and stop worrying about what the person in the lane next to you is driving, because chances are they are just leasing it anyway. Thanks for hanging out today. I'll see you in the next one.